Amelia Mosley and you're watching BTN. Welcome back for the first episode of Term 3. I hope you had the best holidays. Let's see what's coming up on today's show. We're going to get the lowdown on the Paris Olympics, learn about the man who mapped Australia, and meet one of the winners of this year's Haywire competition. All that soon, but first today to the US, where a lot has happened in the world of politics, from an assassination attempt to the president dropping out of the election. To help break it all down, Ren got in touch with Quinn Michell. You might remember we've spoken to him before. He's 16 and he's been reporting on US politics since he was 11. Take a look.
Hey Quinn, thanks so much for joining us again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So, Quinn, it's been a big few weeks. Can you sort of run us through what's happened?
Yeah, totally. So today, just a couple hours ago, President Biden dropped out of the race, which is huge.
President Biden has announced he will stand down.
He is dropping out, withdrawing from the US presidential election.
Yeah, I was just playing a game with a friend just for relaxing because it's a Sunday. And I just checked my phone and I got an Instagram notification from someone. And it just told me that Biden dropped down. I was like, what? Because nobody expected that. So I looked into it a lot and, I was on Twitter for a while.
Yeah. How did we get here?
How did we get here? I think Biden dropping out came from his horrible debate performance. It was probably like the worst performance you could give.
We have to do with,
The thing about a really bad presidential debate performance is it's really hard to counter because a majority of Americans are tuned in to that. Probably that's where you get the widest audience, and that's the impression he gave on American voters that night. And that's an impression that's very hard to counter.
Concerns appeal to be growing about President Biden's age and mental acuity.
Experts have already said that his age could be a campaign issue.
You said that Biden's going to be replaced. Do we know much about his replacement?
Oh yeah, it's almost certainly going to be Vice President Kamala Harris in 2020. Biden picked her as vice president, first woman in the vice presidency position, which was a great milestone for America.
The most existential, consequential, and important election of our lifetime.
She'll be nominated in a month or so.
And of course, on the other side, Donald Trump. What's been going on there?
Where do I start? There's so much going on. So. Obviously, on Saturday, July 13th, our former President Trump was almost assassinated in Pennsylvania. One bullet hit his ear, and others went into the crowd. Two were critically injured, and one other died. When Trump got shot, he got up and pumped his fists and yelled, "Fight, fight, fight." And I think I was on Twitter and CNN for the next 5 hours probably. And a lot of America was too.
They shot Trump. He's down.
This is one of the worst historical moments in America.
I'm getting goosebumps right now when I think about this, like for real.
I think the last time something like this happened was when Reagan was shot. We've had a small number of presidents get shot and killed. I think JFK was the last president to be assassinated, and that was in the 60s. So we haven't experienced anything like this for a long time. And for many generations like myself, it's this first time of seeing a president of the United States come within, it was literally half an inch of being killed. A lot of Republicans are calling this sort of a miracle of God right now.
I had God on my side. I felt that.
In your opinion, why is this particular election so important?
A lot's on the line. Both candidates have very, different plans for the country. And just the messaging that has been thrown around this election is like no other.
The defeated former president has made no secret of his attack on our democracy.
The election result, we're never going to let that happen again. They used COVID to cheat.
It's definitely scary, and it's definitely an interesting time to be a Gen Zer in America.
What would your advice be to maybe other young Americans and just other young people more broadly?
I would just say to make the effort to be involved, make the effort to reach out to people too. Democracy depends on compromise, and that just means talking to your neighbor who, might think differently than you on some crucial issues. Talk to everybody you can.
So have more conversations like these?
I think it's so fundamentally important.
Do you know the name of the cybersecurity company whose software update caused the biggest tech outage in history last Friday? Is it CyberCrowd, CrowdStrike, or Cyberdyne? It's CrowdStrike. The outage affected airlines and shops and TV broadcasters.
It's blue. They're all blue with a very sad face in the corner.
Donald Trump has named Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate, which means if Trump's elected, Vance will be vice president. What else is the senator famous for? Is he a former baseball player? Did he write a best-selling novel? Or is he married to a famous singer? He wrote a best-selling novel, which was also turned into a movie.
Don't make us your excuse, JD.
It's called Hillbilly Elegy, and it's about his life growing up in a poor rural community before going to Yale to study law.
To the people of Middletown, Ohio, and all the forgotten communities, I promise you this: I will be a vice president who never forgets where he came from.
Do you know the name of this world leader?
Change only happens if you vote for it.
It's Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister of the UK. He took over the job earlier this month after the UK's Labour Party won the election by a lot.
Change begins now.
The King and Queen have announced they're coming to Australia in October. It's a trip that's been in the works for a while, but it was delayed after the King was diagnosed with cancer. Do you know when the couple was last in Australia? 2014, 2018 or 2020? It was in 2018, although of course back then it was Prince Charles and Duchess Camilla. The King has actually been to Australia 15 times as Prince and has visited every state and territory. He even spent 2 terms at Geelong Grammar School when he was 17. Now to the Olympics, which are about to begin with the opening ceremony in Paris on Friday. And while sadly Jack isn't there, he has been brushing up on his Olympics knowledge to tell you all about the Games.
The Olympic Games, the pinnacle of athletic achievement. Drawing athletes from across the globe to compete in a range of sports for medals, glory and, more glory.
But before they start, as BTN's unofficial Olympic correspondent, I thought I'd give you a rundown of everything you might need to know, starting with... Oh, what are they?
The Olympic Games started thousands of years ago in ancient Greece. The exact date is unknown. Initially, the Games saw Greek men compete in a sort of running race called a stad, before more sports were added.
The Games were held every 4 years during a holiday celebrating the Greek god Zeus, and people would come from far and wide to watch and compete.
Up until 393 AD, when this guy became emperor and decided to get rid of them.
And that was the end of the Olympic Games. Oh, just kidding, of course it wasn't. They're starting on the weekend.
Fast forward to 1894, and a French historian and teacher by the name of Pierre de Coubertin thought it would be a grand idea to bring the Games back, as a way of building a peaceful and better world by educating young people through sport. So he founded the International Olympic Committee, or IOC. And in 1896, the first modern games were held in Athens, Greece, with athletes, male athletes, representing their countries. Oh, don't worry, 4 years later, women were invited to compete as well. The Games have continued to be held every 4 years in a different city around the world, and dozens of sports have been added to the list, including breakdancing, which will be part of this year's Games for the first time. Oh, and speaking of which, this year's Games are being held in... Paris. Or as the French say, Paris. Ooh la la.
Oh, but you probably already know that, and like me, dusted off your beret back in 2017.
Paris 24, Los Angeles.
Ever since then, Paris has been busy planning and spending billions of dollars, building new sporting arenas, as well as accommodation for the athletes and the international spectators. The plan is to make it the greenest games ever. Oh, and about $2 billion has been spent trying to clean up the Seine River. Organisers want to use it for swimming events as well as the first ever outdoor opening ceremony. But because of pollution, swimming in the river has been banned since 1923, so the government has been trying to clean it up. But a lot of people say it's still pretty dirty and have poo-pooed the whole thing, literally. At one point, people were threatening to protest by pooing in the river, which I don't think happened. Or at least, I hope it didn't happen. And since then, both the Paris mayor and this French minister have taken a dip to prove it's safe to swim in. Oh, and while all of this has been going on, the president called a very early election, which didn't go the way he wanted and left the country in a bit of political chaos. There have also been questions about whether some teams should be allowed to compete given their role in current conflicts. But others say that the games are about coming together in spite of politics or even war. And there are plenty of people who are looking forward to watching the games, with billions expected to tune in around the world.
So there you go. Now you're all ready for the Olympics. And perhaps I'm ready for a career change. Sports reports with Jack. Yeah, it's got a good ring to it, doesn't it? Sports reports. And in summer I could wear shorts. It'd be sports reports in shorts. I love it.
Where will the next Olympic Games be held? In Brisbane, Barcelona, or LA? The 2028 Olympic Games will be held in Los Angeles, the first US Games since 2002. Recently, there's been a bit of controversy over weeds. Some well-known nurseries have been selling plants that are actually invasive species. So what does that mean? And how much damage can a plant really do? Cushy is on the case.
We're looking at a real tough one.
Boss, I've located them all across Australia, in cities, on coastlines.
Yeah, looks like this case isn't going to be a walk in the park.
Yeah, they're in parks too.
Cancel your dinner plans, detective. Let's find these weeds.
Yeah, while they might look innocent, pretty even, invasive weeds can be a huge problem.
A weed is any plant that grows where it doesn't belong. In a garden, that's annoying. But in the wild or on a farm, it can be catastrophic.
Weeds can rob native plants of water and nutrients they need to grow. They can increase fire risk and can act as a host for pests and diseases. Some of them are even poisonous for animals.
We're very concerned often about the environmental impacts, about having beautiful native Australian landscapes and bushland and healthy streams that aren't taken over, that aren't choked out by species which aren't meant to be there, which can really take over.
So how did you get here?
Weeds have been a problem in Australia since colonisation, when people introduced a whole lot of new species, sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident. Some of those plant species liked their new environment a little too much and quickly took over. Now we're much more aware of how damaging weeds can be, or at least we should be.
I found the suspects.
Aha! Gazania, aka the African daisy, a flowering plant native to South Africa.
It says here that it's an invasive weed and it's causing some big problems out in the Mallee country.
How did you find it?
Oh, I just bought it at the nursery.
Yeah, recently there's been some controversy over the fact that Gazania here is being sold at some shops.
It's currently in some of our big nurseries, so at Bunnings, or if you go to other large nursery chains or just your local nursery, species which have been identified as highly invasive, as weedy, still able to be sold.
Different states have different laws about what plants can be sold at nurseries. And while some species are controlled, Jack says too many aren't.
Unfortunately, a lot of people's gardens are ticking time bombs. That means they have these plants in there that could end up being the weeds that land care or dune care groups or local councils have to go and deal with.
And it's not just gazanias.
So you might have heard of things like blackberry, lantana, which if you go into bushland, you often see that. People might have seen is one that's called pampas grass. Another good example of something that people often don't think about is cactuses. So we have a whole heap of cactuses that people love to keep, but they really can get into our environment and become very serious weeds.
It's why the Invasive Species Council is calling for tougher and clearer rules about what can and can't be sold in nurseries and grown in gardens.
It's not reasonable to expect every single Australian gardener, when they go down to their local nursery, to know what is a good or a bad plant. That actually this is where governments need to step in. Governments making some clear rules about what can and can't be sold.
He says invasive weeds are a problem we need to take more seriously to protect our fragile ecosystems.
Well, I wish I could say case closed, but I don't think we've seen the last of this one.
Over the holidays, there was a ceremony in the UK where the remains of Matthew Flinders were reburied after being accidentally discovered a few years ago. Flinders is a name that's probably pretty familiar to you, but in case you don't know exactly who he was, here's Jack to tell you all about him.
Whenever I think of Matthew Flinders, I think of the Flinders Rangers, Flinders Street, Flinders Street Station. But who exactly is Flinders? Surely he's not a station. This is Matthew Flinders, or at least it's a portrait of Matthew Flinders, who I have been told was indeed a real-life person. Matthew Flinders was born on the 16th of March 1774 in a town called Donington in England. Which means he would have spoken like this. Sorry, I just really wanted to do a British accent. Sorry, Flinders. Anyway, Matthew Flinders' dad was a doctor who hoped that his son would follow in his footsteps. But Matthew had other plans. Inspired by the adventure novel Robinson Crusoe, Flinders was drawn to a life at sea. And at the age of 15, he joined the Royal Navy. He served on several expeditions, including a few that took him all the way to Terra Australis, which Britain had just begun to colonise. One of those journeys was on the HMS Reliance, where Flinders was serving as a low-ranked officer. He befriended the ship's surgeon, George Bass, and together they were granted permission to jump on a little boat called the Tom Thumb and explore the coast of New South Wales, and eventually the section of water between Victoria and Tasmania. Oh, you know, the Bass Strait, which I'm just realising is probably called the Bass Strait after George Bass. That's history for you. By this point, Flinders had proven himself a rather good cartographer or map maker. So in 1801, the British Admiralty asked Flinders to return to Terra Australis to map the whole island, or islands. You see, back then the British weren't really sure if Australia was a continent or a series of islands, because no one had really been all the way around before. And that's exactly what Flinders set out to do, alongside his trusty companion, a black and white cat named Trim. He had help from a Ku-ring-gai man called Bungaree, who was able to communicate with the different indigenous groups along the coast, as well as helping to navigate the land and sea, identifying landmarks and safe passageways. He was described by Flinders as a worthy and brave fellow who saved the expedition a few times. Once Flinders had finished his mapping, he set off home for England. But along the way, he was shipwrecked at the French-controlled island of Mauritius. It was bad timing because Britain and France were at war and Flinders was put in prison for 6 years. When Flinders was eventually released, he returned to England to work on his book, A Voyage to Terra Australis, as well as detailed maps of the continent, which was now commonly referred to as Australia, thanks to Flinders. Yep, it was Flinders that suggested Australia would make a good name, and it kind of stuck. I mean, obviously it stuck. It's the name of our country, so. Flinders died on the 19th of July 1814, a day before his book was published. He was buried in London, but eventually the location of his grave was forgotten and ironically the great cartographer was lost. That was until 2019 when construction on a speed rail in London unearthed his remains, along with a lead coffin breastplate confirming that it was Matthew Flinders. And just this month he was finally taken back to his hometown to be reburied. Meanwhile, the lead breastplate has been sent to Adelaide, where it will go on display. So we have another way to remember the guy who mapped our country and gave it its name.
Piastri takes the lead of the race.
Things started off strong for Australia's very own Oscar Piastri at the Hungarian Grand Prix. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. His McLaren teammate Lando Norris scored pit stop priority, even though he was in second place, under a promise to swap back before the end of the race. But Norris then nearly took the win for himself.
Lando Norris goes past his teammate
before remembering his promise and letting Piastri get past him to become the 5th Australian ever to win an F1 Grand Prix.
Oscar Piastri wins!
Now over to someone who's no stranger to winning, Tadej Pogačar, who's just won his 3rd Tour de France. Pogačar dominated the final stage to seal a historic Giro d'Italia Tour de France double win.
It's hard to describe how I feel right now. It's all a bit crazy.
And finally to Brisbane, where New South Wales has celebrated a historic win after claiming Game 3 in the State of Origin series. It's the first time the Blues have won the decider at Lang Park since 2005. The game was tight from the get-go, and it took 39 minutes for the opening points to be scored. With only 16 minutes to go, the Maroons led 4-2, but 2 tries in 3 minutes saw New South Wales seal the series.
This term, we're going to be showing you some of the winners of this year's Haywire competition, which asks young people living in regional and remote parts of Australia to share stories about their lives and things that are important to them. Today, we'll meet Lexie, who's going to tell us why she loves to run.
I'm a fast runner. My main event is 800 metres. My family call me the next Kathy Freeman because I win all my races. I've broken the local 100 metre, 800 metre, 1500 metre records. I feel free when I run. Running makes my anxiety go away. For a moment, all my problems disappear. When I'm lost, my whole family is lost too. In our family, we all care for each other. Sometimes I train at the Laverton horse racing track on the dusty red dirt. It's the only spot with no prickles, and it's the only place with numbers where I can measure out my distance. Sometimes when I run a lap around the whole town, my family will be in the car cheering me on.
Go Lexie!
When I run, the world goes quiet. That's why I run.
Oh, good on you, Lexie. Well, the Haywire competition is actually open for entries right now, so if you live in the country and you've got a story to tell, you can get involved. The details are on the Haywire website. Well, that's it from us today for the first episode back of BTN. I hope you've had fun. We'll have more stories for you next week. And in the meantime, you can check out our website or socials if you're 13 or over. And you can catch Newsbreak right here in the studio every weeknight. Have a great week and I'll see you soon. Bye.